This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to another edition of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon here on MITCH Marathon Month. We are getting close to the end, but on July 27th, 2019, I had a chance to talk to Ghost frontman Tobias Forge at Heavy Montreal. It was a quick 10 minutes in and out, and I will present that for you today. Of course, our latest album is Prequel. Came out in 2018. So it's been a year, and I've seen the band twice on this tour. Absolutely spectacular. The spectacle of the whole thing is just it's wow. I mean, it's really wow. Now, last night I had the privilege in Montreal to actually watch the show side stage. That is an experience I will never forget. Absolutely terrific. Anyway, this is a quick in and out kind of episode, so let's just get right over to Tobias from Ghost, backstage from Heavy Montreal 2019. Here is the one, the only, Tobias. We are here at Heavy Montreal with Tobias from Ghost. A pleasure to have you in our city.
Thank you for welcoming me and my band.
And your band. Yeah, so let me ask you about this. For many years, you were cultivating the mystique of the band, faceless, with the masks on, a little bit like Kiss was doing. The mask came off. How has that been for you? Has it changed the perception from the fans? Does it change anything to lose the mystique, or does it add a new layer to the whole thing?
I think both. I think that some parts of the mystique was obviously changed for personality treats, I guess. The same way that the same rules that sort of applies for every other band. Right. So with that being said, having said that, I don't feel necessarily that it's a bad thing. It's just that over the years where, as you said, I cultivated, where we had a different atmosphere around the image of the band, I definitely grew accustomed to the idea of not being the focal point, which I actually did like. Yes. So when time came to change things around a little, it was definitely not because of me wanting to be recognized. It was more like a necessity. It was just what it was what it was. Throughout all those years when I was a complete non-successful musician, I wanted nothing else but to become famous. Whereas over a few years being in a famous band, I actually non-famous in a way. It has its perks, but definitely I don't want to be more famous as a person. That's why I always try to improve our show now in order to have, I want to give people something to talk about with the craft rather than me.
Well, okay, so talk to me then about the craft, because you look at bands like Kiss and Alice Cooper that had the spectacle that added to the songs. You were in Repugnant, you were in these bands, you were selling cell phones out in Sweden, you had sort of given up on the dream, and now you came back and you created spectacle. How important is that to what you do as opposed to the music, or is it always music first?
Well, of course, the reason I would say that even...
Well, forget the music. How just important is spectacle to what you do?
Well, it's very important, of course. Okay. But I will always withhold the fact that with Ghost, music did come first. It was a bunch of songs, and also because I knew that there was going to be a visual presentation that was going to be spectacular, I also made sure that the songs came out on MySpace before any photo did. Because I wanted to, at least in the greater scheme of things, I can honestly say that anyone who listened to Ghost early on did so without knowing what it looked like, what it was going to be looking like. And so I know for a fact that the first thousands of people that started liking Ghost did so without even knowing what it looked like. Therefore, I dare to say that the music did come first. It was the music. And now, fast forward 10 years, I'd say that if we had a real kick-ass image, the imagery was great, and we had the bombs and the fire and all that, but the song stunk, we would not have been here.
Yeah.
So, for me, they go in tandem. For me, it's like my job is to write cool songs for Ghost, and we package it in this awesome sort of theatrical show. And it's like I don't spend much time trying to like overanalyze that. It is what it is, and I just try to improve it. Every time I write a song, I try to write a better song than I've ever written before. Sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. Every time it's time to put together a new stage show, I try to do something that we haven't been able to do before. And luckily, so far, knock wood, we've managed to make better records and bigger shows. And so far, we're sort of moving in a trajectory that sort of points slightly up.
Your trajectory is fantastic. Like I told you before we started, my wife never wanted to come to a festival. Because you're here, she's coming. So you're doing something right. You've changed band members over the years. Where do we go in terms of new music? Is it still a band thing, or is it just going to be Tobias? You write, you're the musical director, you're the everything. And where do you see the next album going? And I keep hitting this plant.
I'm going to make this next record the same way that I've done every record.
Okay.
And that is me being in charge. That's how it's always been. And then there's been like various people coming in and out in terms of performing. For the most part, which is not a secret anymore. But I've used the same drummer that has never been with the band ever. Throughout most of the recordings, and I think that will remain, because we have a very good working relationship, and he does a very good job, and it just feels like one of those nice reunions every time there's a recording. But nowadays also I've found there is this good thing about considering the amount of time that we spend on the road. It is actually quite good for sustainability to be able to part when it's time to wrap a tour, and then during a recording you don't see much of each other. Right. That was the point also during all those years. So some people that were playing in earlier incarnations of the band, were not at all present during any of the downtime. And some of them insisted on being, just because they wanted to be present. But I was always for the idea of parting at those moments, just to be able to tour as much as I wanted to. Because as you've seen throughout rock history, there's been a lot of bands breaking up because you basically spend all that time together.
Yeah, driving each other nuts. Since you do a lot of do all the writing and do all the studio stuff, do you see yourself stepping out of Ghost and doing a Tobias solo record? Is that something that interests you, where you could say something different, or maybe even do a different musical genre? Or is Ghost your sole and only focus and always will be?
It's hard to say always will be. As of right now, I don't feel like... I don't have like a professional inclination to do anything that would feel dramatically different from Ghost. It feels like having broadened the palette and having been able to push in songs that before they existed, I was a little bit on the fence about. He is, for example, even first part of Goulet was a song that was like, I wasn't sure this is going to work. But as it did, that also allowed for a lot of like leverage and a lot of like clearance and a lot of sort of basement to utilize in the in the real estate that you sort of keep excavating and exploring. And having noticed that I can sort of get away with writing Life Eternal and bands and songs like that, it feels like, well, if I can do that with Ghost, and I can also write Mummy Dust, and I can write that and the other, it feels like I don't have to go someplace else to which some musicians do that. Some musicians do it masterfully and just completely do something different with another band.
I was just going to say, I see Ghost more following sort of a Madonna or a U2, where you sort of just reinvent yourself every time, and you're not AC/DC, where it's just the same 3 chords for 30 years.
I'm gonna concur without in any way saying anything negative about AC/DC.
Oh, no,
but
we love AC/DC,
but definitely, yeah, it's definitely.
They're both successful, by the way.
Yes, they're a little bit more traditional, I guess.
Yes.
Whereas, yeah, I sort of regard my writing and my forum of expressing myself a little bit more similar to Queen, I guess,
yes.
Rather than AC/DC in a way. And I like that. I like the idea of hopefully being a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old and eventually a 70-year-old, maybe older, having a very wide repertoire of various songs. I prefer that, I think.
Well, I think it's got to make it exciting for an artist to not just plug in and play the same sort of song over and over. Like, you can really mix it up, and I think that's great.
I believe for the sake of intending to become an artist that plays on a bigger stage and with a bigger, more varied live show. I definitely believe in the idea of having varied music. And I think that that's one of the reasons why Metallica stands out dramatically from basically all the other bands of their original sort of genre, was because they wrote different songs, whereas most of the others didn't, and that shows. I with the odd exception then of maybe AC/DC and I'm trying to come up with another band that like I guess Rammstein is a little bit more like formulated in a way.
Their sound is what we say.
Yeah. But I'm also saying that with a great deal of love, because I think that their thing really works the same way the AC/DC works there, where you sort of get into, oh, here's the Rammstein groove, here's the AC/DC groove, so it works in that way. But then you have the myriad of bands that spent careers basically just moving in circles, like and also one of my favorite bands of all time. So this is said with no spite whatsoever, but Ramones, for example. Yep. I definitely think that, especially on their live performances, it's almost regrettable in a way that they weren't able to capture some of the various ups and downs that they actually had on their records. Because when they came up and played it live, it was always like 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, and where it's like, if they had songs that was beautiful and lush, but they sort of just chose to play the punk stuff. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think that like could we rewind and change a few things? That definitely like.
30 is fantastic.
It is, but so is like Pet Sematary, and so is like there was so many songs that they had that was way more mournful and bigger than a lot of those songs, and I definitely think that's a sort of repeat that will, if you do it long enough, it might end up being AC/DC, or you might also get stuck, because if you're going to play for more than an hour and a half, you need to play different songs.
But you need to color the palette with different anyway.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for that. I know we're out of time. I could go on forever, but thank you. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.